From Marvel, Cobra Kai, Power Rangers, and even Super Mario, we've covered a good number of the franchises that I love. One franchise we haven't discussed yet is Star Wars. Today, in honor of The Mandalorian and Grogu releasing in May, we're going to be discussing how the show Ahsoka has potentially set up a perfect way to reunite the Star Wars story back to the Thrawn Trilogy. For those of you who don't know, the Thrawn Trilogy was a trio of books written by Timothy Zahn that were considered episodes 7, 8, and 9 of the Star Wars franchise instead of Force Awakens, Last Jedi, and Rise of Skywalker. These books were called The Heir to the Empire, Dark Force Rising, and The Last Command, which continued the story after Return of the Jedi and followed the rise of Grand Admiral Thrawn. As of recent, these three books, along with many other parts of the Star Wars lore, have been separated into what is known as Legends. So today, I've actually thought of a way to bring back the original story and see how it could make a return back to canon. Let's begin. To start things off, we're going to quickly establish almost everything that's happened in the timeline. I may miss a few things here or there. We're going to be beginning at The Phantom Menace, then Attack of the Clones, The Clone Wars, Revenge of the Sith, and as time goes on, we then follow The Bad Batch, Solo, Rebels, Rogue One, and finally the original trilogy. Now, like I said, there's some projects I didn't mention, such as Andor, the Tales shows, Obi-Wan, and The Acolyte. And this is mainly because I haven't watched some of them, and there are others that I just don't want to watch. But we then jump to The Mandalorian Season 1 and 2, which does a great job of setting up the post-Empire world. After that, we then cut to The Book of Boba Fett and Mandalorian Season 3, unfortunately. But this finally does lead us to Ahsoka. This is the main show we're going to be looking at in regards to this theory. Now, this show acts kind of like a fifth season to Star Wars Rebels, that follows Sabine Wren and Ahsoka Tano's pursuit to find Ezra Bridger. Now, importantly, in Rebels and Ahsoka, the Ghost Crew is usually pitted against Grand Admiral Thrawn. Thrawn was the main antagonist of the original trilogy of books, in which he was a genius strategist and a tactician who never lost his cool. Now, the key detail is that after being lost with Ezra in Rebels' final episode, Ahsoka shows how Grand Admiral Thrawn is able to return and escape Peridea. However, Ahsoka and Sabine by the end of the show are stranded on that same planet. And this is where I began to think, what if Star Wars used this as an opportunity to begin the Thrawn Trilogy's story? Originally, the first book of the Thrawn Trilogy, Heir to the Empire, began about 5 years after the Return of the Jedi. And coincidentally, Ahsoka is also set 5 years after Return of the Jedi, meaning that currently Luke would be trying to rebuild the Jedi, which we end up seeing in the Book of Boba Fett. Han would be a general, even though he wouldn't be too thrilled about it, and Leia is trying to get rid of any other part of the Empire's reach. Now, with Thrawn's return back to the galaxy, it's very possible for him to try and rebuild and even take charge of the Empire, much like he does in the books. They have a huge opportunity now that Thrawn is out and about and still alive. Not to mention the introduction of Captain Pellaeon in Mandalorian Season 3, Mount Titanus being in The Bad Batch, Leia receiving Jedi training, and even Luke struggling to form the next Jedi Order. Almost every necessary piece of the original books is falling into place for this trilogy to take place. In addition, since they've made Thrawn a primary antagonist for the Ghost Crew, at that point in time, Han, Luke, and Leia would have little to no knowledge of Thrawn's existence, much like in the books. And with the Ghost Crew spread all around, Thrawn wouldn't focus on them and would rather go for the bigger fish. So with all that being said, how could they actually pull this off? Although they most likely won't be able to do a live-action story with this unless they recast everybody, they may be able to pull off a Clone Wars, in which they can have an animated series that follows the story of the Thrawn Trilogy, seeing Luke, Leia, and Han having to deal with Thrawn's return. You can either bring back some of the original actors to voice the characters, or you can have brand new voices to step in the roles. And it also gives the opportunity to show the original trio in their primes. The show can have at least one season each that adapts one of the books, beginning with The Heir to the Empire, Dark Force Rising, and finally ending with The Last Command. Now, some people may be a little bit upset at the fact that Thrawn has been a villain for the Ghost Crew for so long, and yet they won't be the ones who technically stop him. That's where this new spin on the story can help, because you can make a sibling show. I'd say the most interesting way to do this is to make a second show that releases in between maybe Heir to the Empire and the middle of Dark Force Rising. This show would reunite the Rebels as Ezra, Hera, Chopper, Zeb, and most likely Jason would focus on trying to retrieve Ahsoka and Sabine back home. Once that mission is complete, the team would then turn their focus onto finally stopping Thrawn, only to find out that Luke, Leia, and Han have already been dealing with him. Then, during the storyline of Dark Force Rising, at the halfway point, an episode can show either Luke's team, which consists usually of Mara Jade and R2-D2, Han's team, which usually consists of 3PO and Lando Calrissian, or even Leia's team, which is mainly her and Chewie. Any of these three teams could end up running into the Ghost crew in their pursuit to stop Thrawn. The two teams would end up recognizing each other. Again, all three have a way to do this. With Leia, she has met this crew before. With Lando, he also met the crew and worked with them in Rebels as well. Or even Luke recognizing Ahsoka. They then would realize that they have more people in this fight than they thought. The main show would still continue after this interaction, allowing its story to still focus on Luke, Leia, Han, and Mara Jade. But it would allow the sibling show to tell a separate story on how the Rebels are going after Thrawn at a different angle while he's focused on the main trio. Now, the only things you might have to change off the top of my head would be something along the lines of specific dialogue. For instance, when Thrawn recruits Joruus C'baoth, C'baoth only joins after he's promised Jedi to form in his own way. In the book, those Jedi are Luke, Leia, and the twins that Leia is pregnant with. But with a slight change in dialogue, after mentioning those main three examples, Thrawn could add that he knows of other Jedi who are out there that he could eventually retrieve, further giving C'baoth more reason to join. And if you need an idea for the Rebels story to continue where Ahsoka left off, maybe a story that you can adapt would be something along the lines of Shin Hati searching for a new mentor and hearing about Joruus C'baoth. The Ghost crew's mission is to make sure that Shin doesn't end up finding C'baoth and to make sure he doesn't get any Jedi or Sith on his side. In the end, Luke, Leia, and Han would be able to beat C'baoth and Thrawn, but we'd get to see that the Ghost crew plus Ahsoka were on the other side fighting alongside our heroes the whole time. And even after the show is finished, you still have so much that you can do with this storyline that you've set up. Now you can continue to adapt the books even further, since the original timeline has been repaired with a few brand new additions. You can make a show that follows Mara Jade in her days as the Emperor's Hand, Ezra and Sabine continuing their training, or even Ezra training Jacen, Luke founding the new Jedi Order and training Jaina, Jacen, and Anakin Solo, and eventually Ben Skywalker. It's a way to bring the original story that people loved back to the center stage. And even with those characters, since Luke is busy forming the new Jedi Order, it helped him to know that there are other Jedi out there fighting, such as Ezra Bridger and Sabine Wren. Plus, even if they adapt the story of Jaina Solo, in the books she ends up being trained by Mandalorians. Now, not only can you use someone like Boba Fett, like in the original story, but you can also have characters who are connected to Din Djarin, who has experience with a Force-sensitive being, or even Sabine Wren, who is training to be a Jedi, but she doesn't use the Force as much as her own tech at times. You have perfect characters to set up the story and make it amplified even more. So with all that being said, that's how Star Wars could bring its original trilogy story back to the canon. What do you guys think? Would you be interested to see this franchise take this turn? Or do you maybe prefer what's already happened? Let me know all your thoughts down below, and until then, may the Force be with you.